Aristotle, Essential Aristotle, selections from the Nicomachean Ethics and from the Politics. Identity, Youth, and Crisis. You may have heard me talk about this book a bit in the Freud series. Erikson was Freudian. Got that for $1. Sex and Temperament in Three Primitive Societies by Margaret Mead. You may know about Margaret Mead, an anthropologist. She is a Marxist of some kind. So I thought this would be good to have around just for the sake of having some anthropology, just for the sake of having some Margaret Mead, and to either discredit this or to learn from what she has to say about it. Published 1935 originally. Freud, 3 essays on the theory of sexuality, the cornerstone of Freudian psychoanalysis. Now, I think I purchased this before I had read Dora, an analysis of the case of hysteria by Freud, because in reading this I eventually just had to throw it down and say, I'm done with that. That is terrible. That man is one of the stupidest men in the history of mankind, and I don't need any more of his stuff. So now I've got a couple of his books, and that's unfortunate. But if I ever do want even more explicit reason to hate him, this will be a book to read, 3 essays on the theory of sexuality. Essential works of John Stuart Mill. So this has utilitarianism, On Liberty, The Utility of Religion, and then his autobiography. And I also have by John Stuart Mill, On Liberty, self-contained volume, which I'm halfway through, a little more than halfway through. About 1/3 of this is worth sampling and talking about it. So I might eventually do a video series on that. It's ripe and ready. On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. Let's see, what can I say about it? It's not a cornerstone of human historical analysis. It's not a cornerstone in philosophy. But it is a classic. And an educated citizen walking around saying that he knows something about morality and ethics and philosophy had ought to know something about John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. So I encourage you to send me a donation to get me to do that. The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. The Marx and Engels Basic Writings on Politics and Philosophy. And then I've got one more, I think, on that. The Marx-Engels Reader. Yeah, I'll pull that out. Just keep them together. Edited by Robert C. Tucker. The Marx and Engels Reader. For the first time in one volume, a full range of writings from the young Marx to the later works of both Marx and Engels. The American Transcendentalists, Their Prose and Poetry, edited by Perry Miller. Published fairly recently, I think. Good Lord, 1957 originally, so this is obviously a newer reprint. So they've got Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and more. So quite a few more. So, American philosophy. What do you know? You got to have that. One of my favorite books of all time. This one shipped from Utah. Human Accomplishment by Charles Murray. Excellent book, worth every penny. I paid full price for that baby, $30 or 40 or whatever. Utopia by Thomas More. Got this for $1. I've got copies of it in Utah. It cost me over $1 to ship here, so now I don't have to ship them. The Logic Book and the Logic Book exercises, selected answers, and so on, from Utah. Philosophy. The very first 35 videos on this channel, Mr. Cropper, were videos of logic from these books. The Slightest Philosophy. This is not my book, it's been borrowed to me, and I have not read it. It is actually a discussion between a professor and a student. I've sampled a couple of places out of it, but I haven't taken the time. I'm just too lazy. And we'll finish up with the philosophy, the last 10 books or so. Philosophers Speak for Themselves, Berkeley, Hume, and Kant. The great statements of Berkeley, Hume, and Kant on what man can know and do, presented in their own words. Free Will and Determinism, edited by Bernard Berofsky. So I don't know what to do with that, because free will and determinism is such a silly thing. Like Christopher Hitchens has been asked, do you think we have free will? And he says, of course we do, we have no choice. Copyright 1966. He's got stuff from John Hospers, Sidney Hook, Moritz Schlick, Ari Hobart, Philippa Foot, C.A. Campbell, finally, a name I recognize, John Stuart Mill, Jean-Paul Sartre, more names I don't know, St. Augustine's down in there. So, people who are fascinated by the idea of determinism and think that we might not be making any choices and this is all predetermined, would do well to pick up a copy of this baby, A New Kind of Science, because you'll discover that where you find complexity, you're finding randomness for all intents and purposes. So determinism is hokey, just a bunch of hokey. Plato's Statesman. I don't know if that's I'm not familiar with him having written a book called The Statesman. So this might be like a chapter out of the Republic or something, or selections from his other writings on this particular subject. I don't know. General editor was Oskar Peist, P-I-E-S-T. So for 50 cents, no, $1 for that. The Political Ideas of St. Thomas Aquinas. What do you know about them? I've heard his name again and again. I'm sure I've read parts of him. I've read things about him. Have never, done a full book or full essay by him, so that's available now. Readings in Philosophical Analysis for $1. Leave a bad taste in your mouth if you do much with it. Herbert Feigl, F-E-I-G-L, Feigl, and Wilfrid Sellars, S-E-L-L-A-R-S. Some sort of 1949, maybe. I don't know. It's probably full. I was gonna say it's probably full of analytic philosophy, but apparently it's about the philosophy of analysis. So, oh, good Lord, W.V. Quine. Look out when you see Quine coming. Bertrand Russell on denoting things. C.L. Lewis. More Quine, Lewis. There's quite a few names in here. Quite a bit. So, maybe someday. Not high on my list, but for $1, I've got to have it on my shelf. Dante's Purgatorio, Italian text with English translation. It's got the Italian and English. Dreams of Reason, Science and Utopias by René Dubos. I don't know what he's going to say, because science and utopias are absolutely opposite. Philosophy and the Human Condition, a despicable textbook, fairly recent in publication. Have 1980, recent enough. And let's see what we've got. Brand Blanchard, The Philosophical Enterprise. On Philosophy and Definition, Plato. Ernst Nagel, Charles Stevenson. I don't know. A guy named Vergers. Raj Phillips. Rene Descartes. Meditations on First Philosophy. Now, see, for $1, having one of these babies around for $1, once in a while you hear a name in philosophy, you can go and grab 3 or 4 of these off your shelf, look through them, and what do you know? One of them's got an essay by this guy who you want to know a little more about. And you've got classical stuff in here, like Descartes. It's got a selection from Karl Marx and Engels. It's got a selection from Darwin, Thomas Huxley, B.F. Skinner, Jean-Paul Sartre, Michael Crichton for some reason. I don't know what, because why just have useful stuff? David Hume on suicide, interesting, and on and on. So Friedrich Nietzsche. So these are treasure troves. Usually 50% trash, but if they put any classic stuff in there, then you've got that much. The Worldly Philosophers, The Lives, Times, and Ideas of the Great Economic Thinkers. This one has Adam Smith, Karl Marx, John Stuart Mill, Thorstein Veblen, John Maynard Keynes, Robert Owen, David Ricardo, and Henry George. Published in 53 and again in 61. I've got a copy of this in Utah, but I got this one for $1 here in New York. That is my philosophy section.